my panel, we are going to be talking about removing friction to reaching consumers and customers. I have some unbelievably amazing people from the industry here with me today. I have Joanna Popper, who needs no introduction, but I will let her introduce herself. We have Aaron Aksu, who is XR manager at Deloitte. We have Jeremy Dalton, who is an author, and we have Tom Emrich. If you guys want to introduce yourselves a little more deeply than I just did, please feel free. Go right ahead, Joanna.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for hosting us. It's great to be here virtually with you all. Hopefully one day again live in the not too distant future. And it's great to see Tony and Larry and Samantha and everybody else. I'm at HP. I lead our go-to-market for virtual reality, and I also have been a producer on some XR productions at various film festivals. Thank you.
Tom?
Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. I'm Tom Emrich, and I'm the VP of Product at Eighth Wall. We're a leading web-based augmented reality development platform, very passionate about making the web a powerful place for reality content, and I head up both product and marketing in the organization.
And do an amazing job of it.
Thank you.
It's a wonderful company. Jeremy.
Hey, Linda. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm the author of a book called Reality Check, and this is designed to help newbies to virtual reality and augmented reality understand its impact from a business perspective. And I also happen to be the lead of the virtual reality and augmented reality team for PwC in the UK.
Very cool. And Aaron, last but not least.
Appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation, Linda. Nice to see you and Tony as well after a while. I'm Aaron Aksu. I'm a senior manager at Deloitte's digital reality practice, so focused on all things AR, VR. I've been in the space for the past 10 years and came from a startup called Emblematic Group, focused on immersive journalism and documentary filmmaking. And then I joined the enterprise world, and I'm much more focused on government and business and enterprise using AR, VR now. Looking forward to this conversation.
Very good. I am so incredibly grateful to have all of you here. Now, the rules for our talk today is that this is very open and free-flowing. So I have some questions, but I'd love it if you guys want to talk to each other. If you say, well, now that you say that, I'm thinking of something, please do. I'm hoping to have enough time for a Q&A session at the end. So if we have some few minutes at the end, we'll do that. If you are listening and you would like to post a question, please post it in the Discord, and we can bring it up later on. All right, so the subject at hand is removing friction to reaching consumers and customers. I thought it would be really fun to just launch this panel with, a stake in the ground and to say, please discuss this stake for right or for wrong. So this is my stake in the ground. Companies need to start thinking about how to integrate XR into their strategy when planning how they approach and interact with customers and consumers. And all customer touch points will be impacted. So it's not just marketing, it's sales, it's customer service, it's operations, all of it will be affected. So here's the question. Based on your perspectives, what are the things that you think are holding companies back from XR right now? And what are the barriers to adoption? And I did specifically say XR, not WebXR, because I want to get to the WebXR part of it after we talk about the barriers to adoption there and what the friction points are. So that was my stake in the ground. Anybody? Tom, you're nodding your head pretty enthusiastically.
Sure,
what do you think?
I can throw a horseshoe around that stake and see how close I get to it. So I think one of the big things for me is storytelling. I think sharing success stories, sharing data points, sharing case studies is extremely important, especially in the early days of the use of a new technology. I remember so clearly when Google, for example, released finally a blog post on Google Glass Enterprise Edition a while back. And it was like the first time we had seen a really powerful statistic around how assisted reality was changing the enterprise space. And then from there, it was astonishing to just watch the press start to have more and more stories from the enterprise around how to use, monocular heads-up displays and augmented reality devices to really move the needle within work. And I think on the flip side, from our camp, just in the case studies and the proof points that we're sharing in the use of WebAR for marketing and advertising, we're seeing the same as well. One story leads to another, and this really helps to boost confidence within the space, as well as to paint a much clearer picture as to where augmented reality is moving the needle. And the answer, as you mentioned, Linda, is in every single phase of the marketing funnel and beyond, right? And so this is really what I think we need within the industry is more proof points, more case studies, more data points, because essentially what industries are doing is they're putting together their business cases, and they need this as, you know, really powerful data points to be able to justify pilots, experimentations, and especially full rollouts. You know what I mean?
Right. Aaron, I know you mentioned when we talked before this you talk about the enterprise a lot. Do you have something to add that you want to say?
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of what Tom said, I think business cases and case studies and more data is absolutely what we need. What we're seeing is, I think in this third generation of VR or AR, I think Tony and Larry can attest to the generations, right, of the jetpack that was promised. We saw a lot of different types of, you know, AR, VR applications that really weren't good representations of what AR, VR is good for in the enterprise world. Without naming any clients, you know, we saw anywhere from how do you roll a better burrito through $1 million application to how do you have a roller coaster experience that's going to make you nauseous, right? For a theme park. And so I think a lot of those types of experiences of let's just throw AR, VR technology at every single thing really caused an issue with enterprises being misled and misunderstanding what AR, VR was capable of. And so now I think we're beginning to see hot spots of where AR, VR is actually very impactful. And a lot of companies are doing case studies on those. And it's prompting more interest and more demand. So I think I like taking a human-centered design approach, very much so, and really understanding or trying to understand what the core of a problem might be. And then once I really understand what the problem is, whether it's an enterprise user or a consumer, then I like applying AR, VR, or if it's another technology where AR, VR doesn't belong, you know, taking the client towards that frontier technology. So I think it really is about, you know, what is the core problem? And is AR, VR really the right solution for you? And then the case studies, as Tom mentioned, is how I
understand. You know, I have to tell you a story. I was head of digital strategy for a large ad agency in New York 12 years ago. And the funny part of it was we had a client who wanted to use Second Life at the time. And it was, my response to her was, I know it's cool, but what does it do for your brand? Like, your brand is middle-aged men traveling in the middle of the country midweek to stay in a local hotel. They don't want to go see you in Second Life. Like, this is not a solution, right? Yeah. So if you come at it from a strategy perspective about how it fits, then I think I understood. We shouldn't lead by the technology. We should lead by the use case. Joanna and Jeremy, weigh in. I'm talking now.
Well, there's a lot to say about it. I think that you know, your original stake was, you know, all these different places where VR, XR can fit along different workflows and pipelines that are mainly customer facing. There's also a lot of interesting internal use cases, such as learning and development, enterprise training, product design, and across products, across AEC, fits in really nicely in those workflows. So I think to the points that have been made about where does it really fit well is important. Having those the ROI of clear case studies is important. An interesting thing on enterprise is that, like Aaron just mentioned, that he didn't want to mention his clients' names, right? So often, there isn't always public data about somebody did this and this was the results were, because a lot of these enterprise or first responder type groups that we work with don't necessarily want to share all of their privileged information. But that said, Jeremy and his team just did a great study. So I'll throw it over to you, Jeremy, about the great study you did with some really strong data about the power of XR.
Thanks, Joe. So it's true that we definitely need more data points when it comes to XR and industry. However, I would say that there is enough out there to act as a hook for clients to have information and to get them interested in the value of the technology, or at least get them talking about it in a way that is a bit more than paying lip service to the technology. The problem then becomes converting them, like really getting them to put down the money. And I think we're alluding to this point on the panel as well.
Yeah.
What I find generally causes that issue is the fear of the unknown. So you have even innovation leaders and people who are there who are meant to be exploring the frontier of innovation and emerging technologies. They themselves still fear implementing something that they have not done before, and they have not been involved in, they don't have a sound knowledge of. And that holds organizations back because it is effectively a fear of failure. What if we implement this and it doesn't have the impact that we hope for? I can't wrap my hand around this technology yet. So let's not engage. You tend to get an incentivization to go back to the status quo. That's the nice, warm, comfortable area. Let's just stick with the normal e-learning packages and things like that when it comes to a training context in this case.
Yeah.
And I think there's a territorial aspect to that as well. And we can discuss that more later, but in the UK at least, and there's a hierarchy of sort of technological innovation and adoption. The US definitely, I would say, is superior to the UK when it comes to taking risks and wanting to engage with this technology. And naturally, a lot of other countries around the world will form some part of that hierarchy.
Jeremy, it's funny you said that about the innovation lab, because it was one of my questions. Do you think is XR trapped in the innovation lab? But you covered it, so I don't have to ask that. What opportunities do you as a panel think that WebXR brings to this mix? Because we talked about some of the friction around XR. What does WebXR bring that could solve some of these problems?
I love to jump in on that. I think one of the things that would answer your question here, but also maybe even piggyback off of the conversation we just had, is interoperability and scale, and seeing augmented reality and virtual reality and 3D as part of a holistic solution that allows for you to, for example, invest in 3D assets and use 3D assets in multiple ways to see multiples on your investment. And the web is a very open, flexible, free place that integrates very nicely into existing systems, new systems. And so I think the one thing that I would really stress when it comes to WebXR in particular is that you're able to leverage augmented reality and virtual reality in a way that makes use of your legacy systems, your existing systems. You can mix, especially we're seeing on the WebAR side, you can mix in WebAR marketing campaigns very nicely with your digital ad spend or your social ad spend or your out-of-home signage. And I think it's when you start to show how augmented reality and virtual reality, or WebXR, can fit within the strategies that these organizations are already working with and how they're going to enhance and level up, while also providing the learnings to then start to transition fully into these technologies. That things get really exciting. And that's also why we're able to move outside of the innovation zone, is because it's no longer innovation, it's business transformation, digital transformation. It's part of that journey.
I like that, reframing it. I think that's a good one.
I've also, can I add to that, Linda, as well?
Yeah, please do.
The reduction in friction, and Tom's part covered this as well, but it comes from this effectively having the technology in our pockets by default to enable this technology and make it accessible to a wide range of audiences. When I conducted research for Reality Check, I determined that it was over 2 billion mobile devices that were capable of high-end augmented reality. And by that, I mean effectively the mobile device is capable of understanding the surfaces in an environment, and therefore you can place 3D objects, materials, media in context with that environment, anchored to a point in that environment. And that also enables a lot of interesting use cases. But despite how amazing that is, and the fact that we didn't have access to that only a few years ago, or at least the mainstream consumers didn't, we now have a third or more of the population of mobile devices, or at least the population of humanity, that have the ability to conduct that type of technology and use it.
It's interesting you bring that up, Jeremy. We had someone on the town hall a few weeks ago, and he was from India. He's a developer, and he was building a WebXR classroom, and it was beautiful, and it was fully interactive. And his point was, you're all great talking about these headsets, but we can't afford them. And people in India are still using the mobile web, and they're using Google Glass, the cardboard, and I think we were all like, wow, we hadn't thought about that. There's an emerging market side. And I know, Joanna Popper, that might not be the best thing for HP necessarily to be leapfrogging, but I think it's an interesting point that there's a lot of people out there who aren't necessarily still accessing all this stuff. You unmuted. Do you have something you want to add to that?
Sure. Well, you mentioned my name. So yeah, absolutely. We're working in this area. We're highly focused for right now on headsets, but we also have computers and lots of other technology at HP, and so we're working. We have Chromebooks and just lots of different price points and lots of different ways that we interact with customers really all over the world. And so we work very intensely with customers in India and many other countries. And so we get to see. I mean, we say that we have the most comprehensive commercial XR portfolio across the entire ecosystem, because we have different things for different use cases and different price points. Whether it's something like HP Reverb G2 Omnicept Edition, which comes with eye tracking and pupillometry and face camera and heart rate sensor, as well as an SDK for cognitive load and more coming on that. And then apps that are being built on top of it, or it's something that's being used in a school that is just easily accessible and in terms of price and in terms of other factors. So it's a really exciting time, and I think that everything that we can do that removes the friction, that puts it in, and that puts the technology and bridges that digital divide and puts the access to the full solution, not just the hardware, not just the software, but that full solution into a customer, at an enterprise level or at a consumer level's hands is incredibly important, and that's like what we're all working on.
That's great. I loved it. I almost didn't want to bring that up because I was like, Joanna's going to be on from HP. I don't want to talk about it, but that was a beautiful answer, and I love it. I think it's fantastic.
I think I'm so thin-skinned, I can't.
No, not that. I just thought, we were talking about positive things. Hey, Tom, Eighth Wall is a huge leader in the WebXR space. So I would love to hear some of your favorite examples of how companies are using your technology to overcome the pain points that we're talking about. You're muted. Sorry.
I was going to say they're all my favorite, but I'll just talk about a couple that come to mind.
Who's your favorite child?
So listen, one of the many things that I love about working at Eighth Wall, which is a developer platform, is just being surprised and delighted by the creativity and the use of our tools on a regular basis. Some of the experiences that just come to mind are anything from air cards and XRM utilizing Eighth Wall to create a WebAR portal for the Super Bowl halftime with The Weeknd, which was triggered off of a Pepsi can, especially marked Pepsi can. Scan the QR code, which is one of the magical ingredients of being able to access WebAR and immediately be able to be brought into a WebAR portal that makes you feel more connected to a game where at this time, not many people were actually able to go in person to the Super Bowl because of the pandemic. Just recently, also, we have an experience for Candyman created by Powster, which is a really interesting example of leveraging Eighth Wall's technology mixed with Google Voice technology, where, if you dare, you say Candyman 5 times into a virtual mirror. And as you say Candyman, it recognizes the word, and bees start, flying out of your mouth and your ears.
That's
and
hilarious.
It's all recorded. So certainly, there's a lot of use with WebAR to really allow for users and consumers to feel connected to brands. One of my favorite words within the augmented reality space and virtual reality space is experience, and I think that sums it up very well. We're now creating experiences for consumers, which are much different than the advertising and marketing that traditional digital media is offering. You watch a video, you listen to a podcast, but that you experience augmented reality and virtual reality. And with that, then we're seeing, dwell time of 5 minutes or more within an experience. We're seeing conversion rates in experience at around 18% in some cases. We're seeing, a lift in sales of 4x for specific collections that are being promoted within the WebAR environment. And so definitely proof points, definitely memorable, meaningful, interactive experiences. And I think, pointing out a survey that the Emoto Institute did in asking consumers if they wanted to see more of these advertisements moving forward, WebAR advertisements, 70% said yes. And it's because it's new, it's engaging, it's intrinsically personal because it's using them or their space, and it's highly interactive, and therefore, you remember the brand, and you feel more connected, leaving the experience.
If we have any people listening who are working at ad agencies and want to know more about how to incorporate WebXR into their advertising, what are your suggestions, all of you? What are your suggestions for how to get people more on board with trying this kind of stuff? And how do you, from the consumer perspective, we have to get people to understand that they can experience these ads, not just look at them, right? What do people think about that? Some ideas around how to get people more involved.
I think putting these types of experiences, to go back to your previous question, Linda, I think
I know we're
one of the issues, I guess the elephant in the room is that, with COVID, we've all been digital first, right? We've all been making purchase decisions at home. We haven't been leaving our houses. We haven't necessarily been visiting spots to go buy things as much. We've been using Amazon and a bunch of different websites to buy everything that we're buying. And people just don't like downloading applications unless they really have to. So having a web-based version of AR/VR and being able to access AR/VR through the web, I think is very organic and is the natural extension to how we would interact with the internet. But also, I think it's really important to utilize existing user interfaces and user experiences that people are familiar with to access these types of experiences. So I think if there was more AR experiences or VR experiences on the web through user interfaces that looked very similar to TikTok or Instagram or Snapchat without actually having to download an application for it, I think we would see a lot more push or drive or demand towards web-based AR/VR, which I think is pretty exciting.
That's great. That's a really good point.
UX are pretty important.
Yeah.
Well, and Aaron, you worked also, you worked at Emblematic with Noni with Reach, which is also
Exactly. So we had built while I was at Emblematic as well, a web-based content creation platform that would have photogrammetry assets, large environments in 3D that you could pull, and we were looking to give the ability for people that didn't necessarily have access to these types of environments or didn't want to learn how to use Unity, the ability to create these types of experiences and then publish them off the web. And so, there's been push towards creating these types of platforms for content creation. But I think on the content consumption side, people are used to what they're used to, and there's billions of dollars going into user experience research. And I think if the AR/VR industry capitalizes on that a little bit as well, we'll see a lot more adoption of WebXR in general.
I think lenses have helped a lot. Instead of it being called augmented reality, it's just, hey, this is I look like a potato right now, like I did before we all met. Anyway, Jeremy.
Ray-Bans as well.
I'm sorry?
Now with Ray-Bans. So,
yes.
That's also going to help.
They're on the path to getting people used to using the glasses as more than just visual aids. Yes, I agree. Jeremy, do you have a comment?
Yeah. To your point, Linda, about getting business leaders to engage with this technology, it's a point that, to be honest, applies to XR in general, but certainly to AR as well, and even web AR. This technology is unlike other technologies in the sense that it's very visual, it's very visceral sometimes, And as a result, it's a front-end technology. It's not a back-end technology where an algorithm does something smart and then presents you with some textual information or output, which is very, educational, informative, persuasive, whatever the objective is. This is an output that evokes an emotional response. And as a result, you really need business leaders to try it firsthand to understand it fully. And I've seen this time and time again where, as we usually do, and Erin will recognize this, we bring out a slide deck, because that is the language of business generally. And people they understand, they see the return on investment figures. It all makes sense. Yes, this is great. This is great. This ticks the box. That ticks the box. But with VR and AR, it's not just a box ticking exercise. It is necessary to experience it, to communicate value in a way that words and slides cannot. And I've seen so many times a complete switch where we've got someone bought into the idea. Conceptually, they're bought in. But it's only when you give them the experience that you see they've made the transition for themselves into being sold. And suddenly they are the champion and proponent of the technology rather than me being the main proponent of it.
Right.
Jeremy, that's by PowerPoint, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I also think that another thing, again, just kind of putting things in context, is history repeating itself. And so I always like to refer back to previous waves of computing to really put into context like what's happening today. And so whether that be reminding them that the mobile web was not something that was immediately adopted until maybe too late for some brands, all the way through to video and just the journey of video and the adoption of video. So I think I do agree with Jeremy. I think there's nothing better than showing the technology. It's what caused me to get into the meetup community building way back in 2013 when wearable technology was really new. You could talk about smart glasses until you're blue in the face, but no one really knows what that feels like until you put them on. Joanna knows that firsthand. But in lieu of that, I think it's also just reminding them that there's these natural cycles that happen with technology, and there's too many signals, like way too many signals now to not ignore, to the fact that this is the next wave of computing and that your business needs to really take note of it. That being said, the last thing I'll say before I give the floor back to you, Linda, is the pandemic for me really was a wake-up call of how many businesses truly still had a lot of work to do with digital transformation outside of AR and VR. And I think, and also people, like, I don't know how many of my friends were on Zoom or FaceTime for the very first time in 2020. And so I think it's something to be said about, and it's a very unfortunate world event. And so just with that in light of how much of a catalyst this pandemic may have been in helping to close that gap on digital transformation, which may have been necessary for the foundation to be built for AR VR discussions to be had. I always say now that it's clear that we needed people to understand virtual before virtual reality, and I think that this is what's happening. You know what I mean?
Agree. I think companies finally realize they can work with a decentralized workforce, and all of a sudden they realize how expensive it is to have office space, and now everybody can just stay home and hopefully someday use their headsets to meet in 3D. That's what I'm hoping for anyway. I think, people didn't want to do Zoom, and then all of a sudden they were doing it for family meetings and Sunday dinners, and all of a sudden like that spilled over into their social life. And I think VR, I talk about VR now, but it is also going to, that same thing will happen where they're like, we have to use this technology for work, and now we're going to start to, and that will help drive more adoption of it. I'm sorry, I cut you off, Jeremy, I think.
No, it's okay. I was just going to mention, has anyone seen that joke meme chart which says survey conducted of business leaders, what has pushed your business into pursuing your digital transformation? And it's sort of 2% saying, senior leadership, 3% something else, and then 95% COVID-19.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, on that note, thank you so much, everybody. It has been fantastic. I wish we could talk a lot longer.